Okay. Oh, this monitor drives me crazy when it's flickering. Okay, so what does today bring? Well, today brings with it some new challenges, some new data, and it brings with it more project stuff. I'd love to make more progress on this off stream, but I just do not have any personal time. So this is my chance. This is my window of opportunity. So, okay, so Raj, hello. How you doing? From Monday I'll be watch you daily. Nice. Thank you. That would be glad to have you here. Hope you're well. So I feel like that every time I hit a hump like this, I kind of come up across a newer design, a newer challenge, and this is what often breaks down larger systems, because what happens is, you start building something, you start building some software. What are we doing today? We are working on adding the projects identifiers to the planning item. This is the Agile platform tool. Let's see if it runs. So this is the planning tool, and we can load in the planning items, and when we go to new item, we can now add multiple projects. Right, that's the goal. And I probably need to hide. I probably need to not hide this, but that's a control issue. That's not a design, a data issue. So I need to collect this data now. So I'm modifying the endpoint to save that, and the projects. So the projects do not necessarily have any bearing on a planning item other than labels. And the goal of being able to assign multiple projects is that if a planning item is too big for a single project, or it might span multiple things, you want to be able to look it up by the projects it's affected by, or it affects. So that's why I've kind of flip-flopped on this piece and decided that multiple projects can be assigned to a planning item. And it's not really assigned is the wrong word. I've got to start coming up with better language, right? So when you're developing software, it's really easy just to kind of go along with the way things are, and just write the code and talk about the code in the code's way, right? But I've got to make sure that I'm trying to express the intent of the screen of the actual application when I'm discussing this. So what am I doing here, right? I'm labeling this planning item as affecting or having changes for these projects, right? Because these projects are the ones, I need to probably make, the labels right this second. When I go in here, I probably need to make sure that I'm, demonstrating a little better would be good. So right now the planning items are kind of hard coded, but let's say this is tenant management, and this is the let's say this is the ticketing group, and this is the planning, right? So when we go to add a new item, we can choose, this affects tenant management and planning, right? So we're not associating this. We're not necessarily making a hard link. We are, I can think of the wording. I'm going to say labeling for now, right? We're labeling this planning item as having concerns in these projects, right? So the language is going to matter more and more. I've got to start to think about the language. And in domain-driven design, we refer to that as ubiquitous language. But in general, in software development, it is good to understand the technical components and how they differ from the way that users see them, the way the users use the application. They have different terms that might not fit cleanly with the tech, but it's better to represent the code in such a way. So what I've called this in the data is associated projects, right? I used this term before for associated tickets. So when a ticket is used to create a planning item, you can see the association there, and it's a similar manner, right? It's an associated project, which makes sense. This is an associated project, so the planning item is associated with these projects right this second. And again, these are just labels as far as this goes. So today I'm going to work on getting that data captured and see if we can push that forward into the view. Ultimately, the view is going to filter. And the reason I'm focused on this part and not moving on to larger parts is this is an important concept within the application, right? Being able to say, hey, I need to see this data is an important concept. So it's the first time I'll come across it. So let's move forward with this. Now, the challenge I have here is, and this is one that I keep hitting. I have the model. The model is actually what persists in the database as well. But in actuality, this is really an aggregate. And I should kind of learn how to split the data off of the thing, right? So this might be a little bit scarier to jump into. Good afternoon, Rambling Geek. How you doing? So as I've read up a little bit more, and as I've dug a little deeper, I've started to see aggregates discussed, right? And no, aggregates are a concept from domain-driven design, but they kind of fit with what I'm kind of semi domain-driven design. Good, not being very work productive. Some days those days happen. Sometimes you just need a distraction. Sometimes you need a diversion. This might not be the right time to introduce this concept either. But ultimately, Mr. Jones, good afternoon. Ultimately, this might be the concept I'm going with. So the problem is, I have add planning item. This is nice, readable code, right? It's very clear. I'm now going to have project identifiers. So what I'm going to end up with is, okay, well, we're creating a planning item. Now, planning item dot associate with projects, right? Something like that. And the reason I'm doing it on the planning item is because this association doesn't matter away from the planning item. But now this planning item is pulling double duty as such, and it gets more complicated, right? So I've already got create from ticket details. I've got an add requirement. So add requirement, this is a similar thing, right? I'm going to add a list of requirements to this. And assigning a user is done that way. And this is so I can trigger events and stuff, right? So this object is not necessarily the data object. It's really the aggregate of all this information. And the data object is one of the pieces. It's the core planning item. So this, I feel this happens because we start to align our understanding of the system with the database models we create. And we don't stop to think about actually what really involves a planning item, right? What is a planning item? A planning item is not just a title, a description, review date. The planning item really is the notes attached to it. It really is the requirements we attach to it. It really is the projects that we assign or that we associate with it, right? And that's the wrong direction. So I do really want to tackle this layer. I'm probably soon because this application is not getting smaller, right? But you have. This is I started the stream saying this, right? We have the planning items here, and I'm going in and said, okay, well, right now I don't have labels, right? So I have nothing to say what that label really means, what this field means. So I haven't really expressed the intent. But what am I actually doing here? Well, I'm attaching the projects as labels to this planning item to say, oh, I believe this affects these projects. It's not hard link. It's not going to say, oh, well, you're only going to see it in this project, etc. It is going to be used as a filter, right? So it's a tag, it's an association. So the wording is going to matter very much, and the use of the thing. So, but a planning item is a lot more than just some text, right? It is the sum total. So even though we have a table called planning items, our model doesn't necessarily need to represent. So if this was planning item aggregate, right, and one of the things in there was a planning item record, that's fine, I think. So I've got to learn a little bit more there because I'm not wholly certain on how to effectively design aggregates, and maybe now's the time, right? Because again, if we look at this article, I'll share it just to make sure, right? We're building a new feature for our system. This new feature includes the concept of projects, teams, and team members. Each team can have multiple staff members associated with it. Staff members can be part of multiple teams. Each team can have multiple projects. So we're using the words, right? Always time to learn, right? Absolutely. Well, that's simple enough. Let's add the fields that might exist on each object, right? So we add those things, database all the things. Doesn't that just look like an entity diagram, right? That's the way we think again. And that's what happens in software is we start to end up aligning our view to our database table very quickly. And we align our understanding of the entire thing down that database table as well. So let's think about behavior instead and not treat these as code objects. Let's treat them as business objects. What can these objects do? You can create a team, edit a team, delete a team. Deleting a team means that all the associated projects ought to cascade and be deleted too. Project. Who knew? But wait, you just found out from your users this won't work. The assumptions you made about the business were wrong. There are times when projects are moved from one team to another. There are also times when projects are orphaned for a period of time. So now other questions arise. What should our model look like when we write our code? Should we load the entire graph of objects into memory? What happens when a project is orphaned? Will the teams just have a reference to a null project object? Right. So again, treating them as classes, treating them as data models, more requirements, right? So aggregates are what solve these kinds of problems. They help simplify our models, isolate business rules, deal with performance issues, allow flexibility. That's what aggregates are for. But what are they? Instead of telling you, I'll show you what one might look like. Team has team member, project has project member, right? Notice I split the original member model into 3. The team and project have their own dedicated version or view of the member that only has the exact data it needs to make decisions about business rules and behaviors within its bubble. So essentially this is what I'm doing, right? I'm saying that, okay, well, this is the aggregate. There is a model underneath of a planning item, but right. So I need to learn how to design the aggregate at the code level, and make an effective change there. But for now, the model is pulling double duty, right? This is the data model, and sorry, my yeah, this is the data model, and it's working as kind of it doesn't have much logic in it, but it does collect the data, and that's what I've got to determine before I start writing these as aggregates. Because again, if I start to talk about rules and business logic, then are these the correct thing? Now, these are in the domain, right? These are in the domain layer, so it's okay for them to talk about it if that's what an aggregate should look like. But I don't want to necessarily put that behavior in there right now, because again, if you look at this, most of these are very simple. They look like CRUD. They look like they are CRUD stuff, and for most part, they are really creating something, updating something, deleting something, etc. But they don't. But they're not complicated, right? There's single responsibility. We're keeping them kind of lightweight. They're not holding on to a lot of things, yeah. So let's create this method for this second. So what this is going to look like is, and again, associate with projects. We're not associating this with the projects. We're associating the projects with this. So I want to be clear about the rule and the order of things as well, because again, if you're coming into the code base and looking at the code base, then what I name that will change your understanding of what I'm doing with the data, right? It's very important, especially as the system grows, that I try to be clearer about the intent, and also that I'm keeping an eye on what wording am I using here? How do I describe this? If I describe it one way here, then I should describe it a similar way or the same way here, so that you understand, oh, that's that part on the screen. I get that. And if anyone's got experience of this, I'm always happy to take any thoughts or opinions on it, because it's you develop software the way you develop software, you grow into it. And actually, I started writing something yesterday. I don't know how far I got, because I've been watching BBB's streams the last couple of days talking about entity framework and stuff. And what's clear is that we both know how to develop software, but we do have different approaches and opinions on how you should write software. And neither's wrong. We can both achieve building a system. We can both achieve writing a system. But I kind of want to dig more into, okay, well, how do people Isn't that true of all devs? What do you mean? I have so many windows open, it's not even funny. Okay, that's the okay one. I mean, all devs have their own thoughts on how things should be done. Yes and no. There are a lot of developers out there that just want to get a job done, and they'll copy what they see. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish more people thought about what they were developing. But I've kind of been in a few conversations, and obviously I've been thinking about this a lot, because the ability to write code does not make you qualified, does not make you necessarily able to build any system, right? I can't build a domain-driven design system. I don't think I understand enough, or I haven't applied enough of the concepts for me to get it, right? I can write software, but I'm learning I can do it. You're chasing that as well, though. A lot of devs don't chase that. A lot of devs just do the thing they're being asked to do. You're chasing that improvement. You want to learn more. You want to build better software, and you're chasing that. So there's a difference in your motivation and your energy for doing that, right? It's hard, right? My point is, you can build a system in many different ways, and there's no right or wrong way, as long as it works. What matters is, can you maintain it? Can you work in that code base? But again, and I started saying this because I was talking about the naming, things as simple as naming can influence a lot of things in the software, right? They can change the way you think about it. They can change the way you understand it. They can change the way you write new code into the system. So, and the different approaches to software development, come from years of different people saying, oh, well, I like this architecture. I like this architecture. Oh, well, now hold on. I like this and I like this, and I'll merge them together. And it's like botany, where you can make new flowers, hybrid super flowers, etc. It's like cooking, where you can just, I'll combine this ingredient with this ingredient, right? It's creative in that respect. It sounds like you're starting to explain the difference between a programmer and a software architect. By title definition, maybe. I think all people, if you can develop software, you are capable of designing software, right? Whether you want to or not, whether you're driven to do that or not. And I do consider it different, designing the software. So this architecture, right, is a clean architecture as such, in that I'm kind of trying to follow the rules that the clean architecture lays out as good design, right? So far, I like it. It makes sense to me, right? But it doesn't mean I'm going to stick with it. So I'm going to not adapt this when I need to, and flex when I need to in different ways, or, go off on my own path. Now, for me, the architecture component comes in not just how I lay the project out, it's how I think about the components, where I group things, who owns certain data, like what data should flow in what direction. Those are all system design challenges, and that would be the architecture part. I never liked the term software architect because I felt it set an upper echelon that would control, oh, I don't like that. You're going to do it my way. And I always felt that took control away from the developers, and I always felt that developers should have control. In the last 10 years, I've probably flipped a little bit, in that I believe that sometimes developers need guidance and rules because they don't always have the bigger picture in mind. And I used to think that, and one of the key problems I'm going to have with this is if I come up against something like an aggregate need, or I come up against a design that doesn't quite fit with what I've got, what do I do? How do I adapt? How do I change? Do I break the system design? Do I just make it work? Just whack it in there? Doesn't matter, right? Those are the sorts of decisions that come back and bite you in the end. So, systems design, architecture, is every bit as important as just getting the code written. So I'm going to stop and pause every time I hit something like this. And, this sort of behavior, this is adding a planning item, right? This is part of adding a planning item. So it fits neatly in here. When I do tenant management, right? When I create a new tenant, yeah, see that I've got some confusion here because I've modeled this a little bit differently, because I was again evolving this design, and I kind of decided that this use case would be a good way to do this. So this uses a transaction because it does many different things, right? So this is kind of a coordinating use case. It's not a handler as such, so I kind of broke it out as a similar design, but I refer to it as a use case. This was an experiment. Now maybe I changed this, but this was the designer and mediator general rule is, or mediator general rule is not to have multiple sends. Or don't inject the mediator into a mediated action. So this is kind of a get around of that. But I kind of like this, and it does allow me to do all these things independently, right? I can fire off, okay, register the user, associate the user with a tenant, register the user with a provider, and register organization looks similar. But in the end, the aim is to make readable, understandable code. And the one thing I wanted to go through with Mr. Jolly is, so he has like outlined this liking of services and having the data layer and not having the repositories, etc. And I've kind of gone this path, and they're both viable ways of building software. And I want to look at, okay, well, not which one's better, but how does that evolve? What does it change to do it one way or over another? And I feel this method is cleaner from a code organization standpoint, but way more difficult. There's a higher cognitive cost to bringing someone else on board, right? The more tiered architecture stuff is way easier to understand and better organized for a lot of developers, but comes with some more cost as well and risk. Because of said programmer versus architect differences, right? Programmers are not thinking about the system design. They're thinking about, how do I get my job done? And Ramble the Geek, I definitely don't lump you in with that label, because I think you are trying to grow, and Mr. Jones as well, from the software I've seen you write on stream and stuff, right? You're both trying to build better systems and not just make software work. So I'm not associating with projects. I'm associating projects. Hi, Sai, is that? Hello, how you doing? Welcome in. Um, so anyone new to the stream, if it's your first time here, I'm developing an application for project planning, agile platform management is how I term it, or Liquid Sky is my little code name for it. I am developing it on stream, but if you have questions, thoughts, or opinions on it, I'm more than happy to listen. I'm more than happy to discuss or go into the technologies I'm using. So feel free to chat. I feel like I'm just understanding the language better. I kind of think the more I understand, the more I will know what tools I have in the kit to achieve what I'm trying to do in a more efficient way. But you've got to practice it, right? I don't understand. I probably don't understand a vast majority of C#, right? The frameworks, the tools, I need to know how to use them effectively. I need to know how to do the things I need to do to get moving forward. When I'm developing code, I can improve it if I learn a new technique, and it's why I like discussing it, right? It's why I like sitting down and talking through it, because like the conversation I had with Michael the other day on stream, I love that stuff. I could sit and talk for hours over that stuff, right? Because it's, and I do, but it's a little bit more one way when it's a streamer to chat, right? Not sure the latter is true. I feel like I understand where we could end up. That's a bit of a struggle with it for sure. How to get there can be really difficult. Morning, Delta, by the way. You've got to practice. You've got to do the code. You can't just, well, I can't. Maybe you can. But if I sit down and read a book on C#, I'm not going to develop better code. I'm going to understand C# a bit better. I'm going to understand some tools I have, but there's a we have some paraphrase of this, right? Where when you have a new tool, everything looks like a nail. When you have a new hammer, everything looks like a nail or something. There's a paraphrase. Maybe that's a paraphrase of a paraphrase. I don't know, but you get a technique in and you go, oh, I can apply that. So you apply it everywhere, even if it's the wrong thing. But I feel that that's a necessary step of learning, because you've got to understand when you've used it too much or when it's not quite fitting, right? I mean, I'm the same. Just because I read a book doesn't mean I use the info right after. I might attempt to use the info and fail, though, and that's okay. Failure is an integral part of learning. Knowing why you failed, that's what's worth discovering, right? Why did that not work? How did that? And again, on this project alone, I've gone through this process, this piece specifically, for weeks, because I'm not happy with what it represents and how it works, right? I'm failing, and I've backed code out. I've not been afraid to do that. I failed, actively failed, right? Prototypes, little startup projects, file new is always useful. Practicing techniques. When the aggregates thing, right? So what I'll do is, if I get the time off stream, I will try and read through. So again, I'm not trying to use full DDD, but I understand that what I've got here is not a model. It is more of an aggregate, right? So I will read through and I'll tinker through aggregates. I did the same thing with event sourcing, right? I'll go off and write some code that just practices that piece. Interfaces, inheritance, all those things are just fun to practice, right? And keep writing code. I do my best now to test and isolate in edges of the code base. Right. And again, I haven't bought the latest version yet. I really need to. This is my favorite tool, or has been my favorite tool for years, for, look, query 1, query 19. If I want to tinker with something, like Canny and I were talking through, we were talking through events, subscriptions, etc. So we have this public event do something, public event action do something, public action do another thing. So this is a delegate signature. This is public event action string. What is the difference? Well, these two are identical, right? This just inlines the delegate, right? So it is a delegate of that sort. This is interesting because what happens is when you do this, you can subscribe to it like this, right? But what you're actually doing is combining functions. So when you actually, even though they look the same, right? If you do it this way, what ends up happening is everything you subscribe to is a wrapper around a wrapper around a wrapper. So it makes one massive wrapped function and calls them all at once when it, when it invokes. So it's pretty interesting. It is like combining methods. But again, I tinkered with that to understand, and I looked at the IL of this, right? I learned something from doing this. I use this all the time to tinker. I knew it existed, but I haven't really ever properly used it. I do use .NET Fiddle though, which is also .NET Fiddle's, again, it's the same sort of stuff, right? The only reason LinkPad is good, you get full IntelliSense when you buy it. You can connect to databases. You can use this tool for a lot more, right? Another option as well is if you're using something like Rider, is they have scratches and consoles, so you can create scratch programs down here in a similar way to LinkPad. Yeah, the online nature does help. LinkPad does give you some formatting and stuff. So if you wanted to write little reports and things, you can actually output HTML in LinkPad as well. So there's some benefits and there's some drawbacks, right? Sharing code isn't as easy. In Rider, no, that's not the immediate window. This is literally you can actually add these as scratches. They don't get committed. Thanks for the luck, Rambling Geek. So yeah, anyway, I would highly recommend, if you're working on stuff, if you're trying to learn, if you're trying to grow with things, write code. Spool up a little sample program just to understand the concept. Like, oh, I don't understand how that works. Let me just write a piece of code to understand it in a way I can, and kind of build it out until you actually hit the pattern. Because you don't want to be practicing the first time in your code base, and that's what you're saying, Dota, right? You test in isolated instances at the edges of the code base. So either you actually write some code that you can throw away later in the code base, but you do essentially that. You write something isolated from the rest. Okay, so we're going to create a method associate projects. All right, code that I think of as experimental and is likely a mistake. Biggest danger is someone comes along and copies it, or maybe not. Who knows? If you're experimenting with something, don't do it in your actual code base. Would be my advice. Do it where it's not going to be picked up and used. If you don't understand a pattern or you don't understand a technique, it's definitely worth writing some code to the side. And the best spot is Greenfield small microservices. To test your understanding a little bit, I suppose. One option I will have when this system grows up a little bit, right, is I will have the ability to say, oh, I want to get that data and see if I can tinker with it in a certain way. Okay, I consume the data, right? So I can start up a new service and build a service that runs against the data, even isolated from my main project. I can consume all the data like it's real. And this is another benefit of using something like Kafka. You could actually connect to a production system and stream the data into a development database in theory, or into an isolated system, right? Because you can put permissions and stuff and user privileges around Kafka as well, right? Yeah, you could actually stream the data off into a dev instance and manipulate it so that you have data available. It is one of the great so service bus isn't suitable because service bus is point to point. Even if it's publish events, the subscribers are registered, etc. But in Kafka, you can just sit and consume and then get all the events from the past 2 weeks or whatever. Sometimes I have to test in the real thing to get feedback on the idea. Oh, well, it depends on how deep that is, right? A spike is what that's for, right? So you can branch the code, you can do the test and then show it, but you shouldn't. That would be what that would be for. Because then you can demonstrate a change to the code base without actually committing to the actual core code base. Yeah. Something feels wrong about this, and it's bugging me. I've got a niggling, I don't like this anymore. But I don't want to take on writing these as aggregates right now, because the moment I introduce an aggregate, it starts to get a whole lot more DDD. And then I'm at risk of blurring the lines too much. So I want to make sure that when I do that, I'm doing it for the right reasons and I'm controlling the data in the right ways. Phil Schnabel, hello. How you doing? We always test half-cooked ideas in production. What's the worst that can happen? Oh, dear. I wish I could say I'd never seen it. I wish I had a good comeback. Okay, so let's go to the domain. Not tenant management, we're in planning right this second. And again, this is where I could have different solutions set up so that I can focus on the piece I need to focus on rather than the entire project. But being that I am the sole developer, yeah. Associated project. Public int ID. Public int planning item ID. What? What did I identify? These don't need to be. I'm pretty sure I didn't do it here. Yeah. They don't need to update time, etc. I don't believe. I think I tested this in this one. Why did I create a default constructor on this one? Why did I do it this way? So these need to be get sets because I'm going to use them as a data model, right? So I can't make them private sets because without doing some funkiness with entity framework. So I'm not going to do that on these. It probably is entity framework won't like this constructor. I created this constructor so I can construct an instance of it. So I can't use a primary constructor. But you need to provide a default constructor for entity framework because it's going to hydrate this model. So it's the challenge with having, and again, this is the same problem these other things have, right? The planning item essentially has the same problem in that I end up with this kind of weird looking object because I'm trying to use it as a data model, but also add a load of methods on it. Now, there's no behavior necessarily in those methods. Nice. Oh, you have to stop committing now. I'll commit a whole load more. Yeah. So I now feel this pattern is not working very well. So adding to it feels bad. But again, once I introduce what I refer to as an aggregate, we start to move into that DDD world a little bit deeper. And I want to make sure I'm ready for that. So I'll work on aggregates as a because it's not just the problem is with something like DDD, with something. It's not I don't like the pattern. It's just that I don't understand the usage of the pattern in the language, and that's what we can talk about the concepts, right? And I get the concepts, right? They're fine, but how do I effectively write an aggregate in C#, right? What, especially considering what I'm doing, I know that they fit with what I'm doing just from experience, but I haven't really written them, and I'm not trying to move this application to say it's DDD. Well, I want it because I know these are wrong. They smell, right? These smell now. This is not a model anymore. This is way beyond a model, right? And this is going to keep happening. Where I do have an object, it does have associated data. I don't want to have disparate data and everything representing data objects. I know that, like, again, the tickets, the requirements belong. There's no need for requirement to be its own thing. The planning item owns a requirement, essentially. A planning item is the sum of all those parts, right? It's the sum of its requirements. It's the sum of the associated projects. It's the sum of the notes and stuff even. That is a planning item. And if I go into the screen, right, again, the planning item isn't just this text. It's these requirements. It's the notes. It's everything else. So if you continue down the path of adding stuff, the cruft gets worse. And yeah, the readability suffers. This style is horrible. I dislike this with a passion, but it's the only way of making sure I can protect those fields and still make Entity Framework work with them properly. So there's a smell. I want to get rid of it. I want to make sure I look at aggregate implementations and see how they handle that. And that's the problem, right? Is you can read something in a book, but how do you know how to apply it as code effectively, to represent the thing that's described in the book properly, right? So that's why tinkering is necessary. That's why you have to go off and write a little bit of code and learn and grow there, and come up with something that, again, at the end of the day, it's going to be something that works for me. But the moment I introduce, because then when I have aggregates, right, I have a planning item aggregate, right, and a planning item model, right? The planning item entity is just the data for planning item, the record. Maybe that becomes planning item detail, right? Well, that's exactly what that'd be. I mean, so the way I'll approach this is the first what I'll do is I'll go off and write a link pad program, right? And I'll tinker with writing a basic aggregate, and I'll see, hey, does this work? Does this work? How do I write that? Because if you've watched me code for long enough, right? My first thing is, what does it look like, right? How does it what does the API feel like, right? So if I var planning item equals new planning item aggregate, right, and this has name and description, right? Or maybe it doesn't have a constructor, right? Depending on how I do it, right? So planning item dot associate projects, right? So the code at this level is actually going to look pretty similar in the end. This is the sort of stuff I'm aiming for. The only thing that'll be different is how this actually wires up underneath and what it touches and how it associates data, etc. So first I'll play with the API. I'd write the aggregate out, figure that out, make sure it looks the way I think, and then I'd go back here and do a branch and spike it out and see, does it now fit in the application structure neatly? And then if it does, I'd go ahead and do a refactor of all the other things. Because in something as fundamental as this, you have to change the code base, right? You have to be willing to turn around and say, okay, there's a refactoring that's necessary. And I'm in a greenfield project. I have that luxury. And I think you should do. You should make sure you take that time. So yeah, I'll my staged approach to that will be definitely go off and work on it, try and figure it out, and then build the prototype. I'll build the spec. I mean, you're just not in the situation. You're just not in the situation where you charge the head with features over and over again to the determinant of the craft. Right. Yeah. I could have, I mean, look at how much I've done. I could have done way more if I'd have just piled forward with a lot of the features I wanted, right? But I think especially considering what I'm trying to tackle here, I really do feel it's useful to stop and think about these things and try and analyze them enough to make sure that I'm confident that they do. Because if I build this system and it looks like Jira, who benefits, right? I'm not trying to build Jira. I'm trying to build something that helps you as a developer, and the product management team and the leadership team. Is that a trade-off? You get more maintainable code but fewer features. So I think in the beginning, absolutely. I think things are going to move slowly, right? In the beginning, this is a project almost 9 months in the making, right? So far, and I've got very little to visibly show for it. But my hope is that I'll hit a point where I've tackled some of these challenges with the systems design, like edits and deletes and stuff. I haven't even thought about them right now because, again, they're not really fundamental to moving forward. They're fundamental to continued work after the fact, right? So I can practice them later. But I think if I get the patterns down, like here's how I want to handle creating a thing, here's how I want to event things, here's how I want to communicate between two systems, right? Once I've got all those pieces in place, the system is more stable. I have more confidence in it. Yeah, the code is more likely to work also if you code it correctly. Yeah. So more testing, more of those things in place. And then once I've got them as a pattern, I move forward. And I think that what will happen is I will accelerate through features where I'm like, okay, because this is the scariest part. This piece here is the scariest part. Maybe I do more on the back end in terms of features and not worry about the front end. The risk with doing that is that then if the front end needs to adapt or change something, then I've still got to change the back end and blah, 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 right? Because doing the front end can sometimes give you that, oh, I kind of need that, don't I? Yes. So that's why you should never just pile ahead. If you're building an API, fine. Right. The maximum maintainable size of the code base will be larger, also with a better architecture. Yes. Again, not being afraid to pull this apart right now. I will be able to do more. I will be able to scale better. Someone, and I don't think they ever came back. Someone did come in and tackle me on the whole, I'm being kind of naive. I'm building this as basically infrastructure as a service. I'm not building this as a platform. Because I can't distribute these components in something like Azure in a certain way, right? But it's still scalable, even as infrastructure, right? But I can move these things around, I can change them up, etc. So yeah, I will be able to do more with this system. And again, things like Kafka, right? Having that Kafka layer in there. So the argument, and I kind of saw it afterwards when I started to look at infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, all those three things. I think it's infrastructure, software, platform. But yeah, it's because of the way the code base deploys. This right now requires infrastructure. I need an application service to run the API. I need an application service to run the consumers. I need an application service to run tickets. I can't deploy them as actual functions or whatever. So the design is a little bit focused. Yeah. Are each of these another repository in the real world that you can assign an entire team to? So that they might be one code repository, but individually, yes, planning could be assigned to an entire team, tenant management could be assigned to an entire team, ticketing could be assigned to an entire team, right? The view, if you think about the view as the Angular components plus this, an entire team could work on that piece, right? And that's what I'm saying. You could actually I could actually create solutions at each of these levels, and each team would have isolation, right? If you think about the view side of things, if they're just taking the data, they can control how the view looks, and they maintain that. They don't need to say, oh, can we have this column on this table? They own that, right? So the view team runs this view piece and this piece, right? So they can control all those pieces, right? That's, again, the way this is designed. But yeah, each of these could be a solution. So you could pick one area and build it out now. I guess that's planning. Yeah, planning items is my focus because that's the thing that will demonstrate most of the concepts I have. Review dates, alerting, all those things will be built into planning because then they can be extended into the components. Yeah. So right now I'm team planning, right? And also planning will allow me to dog food it. So once I get to a phase where planning is actually functional, I can actually use planning to build the system and keep testing it over and over and over again. The safe experiment areas are actually the other areas, pretty much. And another key benefit of, like, when you build software as and I don't mean to be mean to myself. So if you look at water, drink water, right? There's an API layer, an application layer, which has services. These services kind of group the behavior and the data, the repositories in the background. This is just data access, right? Whether you call them repositories or whatever you do, right? The service layer becomes this big chunk of behavior. Now I want to split the system out into multiple components, or I don't agree with the alignment, right? I've got to move a whole lot of things around to change up that architecture, to change up the design of the system, to move things around, responsibilities. If I want to scale this out, I can't do that with this design, right? It's really bad in terms of its scalability and its flexibility. With this system, if I want to change where some pieces live, or I decide that a single component is getting a little too big and there's some responsibilities that could actually be broken out as a separate things. We got to really spread water, drink water across Twitch, a passion project. But if I want to break out something, let's say I want to break out, let's say notes becomes its own component, and notes actually, we decide that all notes across the system don't need to be stored in their individual pieces, that we say, okay, well, you know what? Notes is a thing of its own. Remind me not to say this, by the way, because this will look silly, right? So notes is its own storage, it has its own API, right? It's its own piece. Okay, well, how do we do that? Well, we go in here and we say, okay, all the notes pieces, which in this instance is notes, right? We create a notes module. We move these pieces into that, and then we go and take the API endpoints that reflect notes, and we move them into that, and then we change the routing on the gateway, and it's done. We now have a notes applications stack, right? And water drink water is built for that discussion, right? It's for why is this not great? Why is and it's why I would love to to talk to BBB more, or someone else who has developed more service stuff, because I would like to know how they avoid certain problems, which to me is, and I kind of said it on the stream, right? These become dumping grounds, right? Because again, that alignment with the model, you start to think about, oh, well, that belongs to consumption, or that belongs to login, or that belongs to group. Oh, well, it's kind of group related, so I'll just stick it in the group service for now. Right. And the developer's making an a decision based upon where they think it fits with what's already there. Whereas with this style, you can kind of just say, okay, well, it does a thing. Here's what it does, right? Oh, planning item, add planning item. Okay, well, that must be there. And the refactoring ability here, the refactorability, the flexibility of the system is much clearer to me. Controller services to repositories seem very important to understand to be able to make the domain. Yeah. So we kind of want to align what we see on the screen to models in the database, and that's not the right thing to do, right? Because then you're like, oh, well, it's a planning item, so that must live on the planning item. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, right? Maybe it's associated data somehow. So yeah, that's that. All right, off to work. Good luck. Delta, thank you very much as always. Have a great day. And if I don't see you around, have a great weekend. So we need to change the model here, right? So entities, associated project. I think this is perfectly fine for now. And then if we go into the infrastructure, the context is here. Associated projects. Might seem trivial, but it's worth alphabetizing these. I think I can do. I think that's possible. Because I kind of like the readability of that, but I need to look into more about what that is. But now is not the time. Okay, so we've added the context, so we need to go to planning item and add public virtual iCollection associated project, associated projects. And we're going to then, do we have configuration, planning item configuration? Here we go, yeah. So we need to, I'm just going to explicitly define that relationship, because there's no necessary I need to make that bidirectional. Planning item. Planning item. That's just an explicit. I think Entity Framework will actually do a pretty good job of working that out for me. It would know that I'm linking to, the associated projects from planning items, so it would know that the planning item ID, it could infer that, but being explicit about it doesn't hurt me here. it does now mean that I can, when I go into associate projects here, I can say, yeah. Now, in terms of relationships, so the identifier is a GUID because that's a publicly shared GUID. I don't need an internal ID. I don't need to know about projects specifically in here. In the planning items piece, projects only matter as far as an association, right? They don't matter in any other way. Let's remove them before I leave that in place. Right, so I don't need to, when I create a project, because projects get created in tenant management right now, when they produce out of tenant management, I don't need to know about them in planning specifically. All I need to know right now is that a project identifier, or one or many, or zero or many project identifiers is going to come through this. So if I didn't pass any in, just bail out. I could put that decision outside, right? Because this is saying associate projects. So again, if command is not null, that might be better from an understanding, because that is called associate project. So we're giving it project identifiers. So at this point, that can't be null, right? So you have to be associating. So the project identifier is our identifier. So that's the planning. There's the challenge. How do I do it with add requirements? Oh, okay. Requirements, when I add a requirement, I pass requirements. So requirements, requirements load up the planning item and then create a new requirement. Oh, that's done very differently. I think I can still do this though, because I haven't saved the planning item yet, right? I think I can say planning item ID equals ID, and project identifier is the identifier passed in. And then that's that. It will attach this associated project, and ID won't be set yet, but because the way Entity Framework works, that should give that associated project our ID when this persists. Okay. I'm being bad here. I'm not doing tests, which is not good, because planning item, when planning item is added and is assigned, it is not assigned. So that is the whole whether these are there. I need when planning item is added and no projects associated, backed, no project associations are added. Pretty simple requirement, but it should validate enough. Again, so private add planning item is our subject equals no dot handler, sorry, not command. This is going to be an arrange act test. So again, if you're new to the stream, if you have any questions about what I'm doing, if you want to learn something more about what I'm doing, the technologies I'm using, I do not need to be productive on the stream, right? I like to be, because it is most of my productive time. However, if you have questions, thoughts, opinions on what I'm doing, I'm always happy to discuss them. I'm always happy to divert and answer any questions and discuss software. So do not worry about distracting me. If you're co-working with me, awesome. That is I'm glad you can do that. Okay, so we need a repository. Private I repository of, what does this take? Planning item. Repository. This is where I like end substitute. It reads pretty nicely for setting things up. Equals substitute for, and then that takes a I mean, that's kind of redundant. Okay, so let's think about the data we want to put in here. We don't care about the tenant identifier, we don't care about title, we don't care about description, we don't care about the review date, we don't care about who it was created by, who it was assigned to, we don't care about any of that, right? So what we want to validate is that what? How do we do that when we do requirements? Planning item, so we want to intercept the add. Right, so what we do here is we go repository dot when r goes to r dot add async arg dot is planning item. Actually, it's arg any planning item. We should be calling it once. Other tests verify that behavior, so that's cancellation token arg dot any cancellation token. Dot do. Oh, am I 1 2 do. So this will info goes to this will capture that thing. So private planning item result result equals info dot planning item. So that will intercept this add, right? So then we should say result dot associated projects is do I have it as empty? We have some extensions in our test stuff. I'm going to do that. Good or bad, I don't know, but is extensions. So the reason I've got these extensions, I know libraries like Fluent extensions or Fluent assertions exist, but I do not like writing the word should in my tests. Personal preference. I don't like it should be this, it should be that, because when you say it should, like, well, that's what I'm expecting it to be, but maybe, so should just seems indeterminate. I'm saying it is. So if it passes, it is that. So just a preference. It does mean that I'm writing my own Fluent assertions, but is empty t It knows what I want to write. Assert the empty actual. And that just gives us some extra readability there. And maybe there's a library that exists, you know, I haven't met one yet, but yeah. And that's the sort of, if anyone wants that, I would happily make that available, those extensions. So concerning planning items, when planning item is added and no projects are associated, no projects associations are added. Okay, so now let's, when running, and all this test, by the way, is that I'm calling add on the collection, and I'm actually adding the project association in there. It doesn't validate it's saved into the database, right? That's not the responsibility of the unit test. Is added and project is associated. Fact is, how did I term it here? Requirement has planning item requirement. Planning item has requirement added. Planning item has project associated. So, in the name of moving this forward, let's do this. %90 of it is identical. Make that arrange act. Don't need that. The only difference here is I'm going to say new. Good, that'd be good. So I don't necessarily need to validate that I'm getting any identifier, but it will be valid to test that the validator, the project I pass in is the one that I say it is. So private read only GUID project identifier. So let's do that. So has project associated. So then we're going to do result dot associated projects dot is not empty. All right, we might as well do the other option. Oh, really? Oh, static void is not empty. And yeah, I could just put assert not empty on the other side, and it would probably read just as well. But result associated project is not empty. Just has like that language flow works, right? Man, I'm supposed to review something. Just seems ironic I'm watching this while reviewing an implementation. Hey MLG, how you doing? At work. This test, nah. Dot. That's not going to work. Not contains. There's no point in making a separate test for that. Prejudice is associated. Nah. That's a wasted test. That's just a test for bumping up the number of tests, right? It's the same thing, right? It's not empty. I expect it to be one. Why bother testing two things? It's not worthwhile. Okay, so we at least know that we call add, right? Because the associated project is set when we pass one in. To validate that 100%, we could do here. We could say grid.newgrid, and this test should fail. Right, because we got one more. So we have one in there with that planning identifier. So we do know it's calling it, we do know it's doing it, and we're confident that it's working, right? So when you're writing unit tests, you've got to be confident that they're actually adding value and that they're actually testing the things that you say they're testing. So I kind of did that backwards. I should have built upon the logic, but it's fine. If you're new to the stream, if you have any questions, thoughts, opinions on what I'm doing, you have different ideas, different designs that you've used. I'm always open to learning those things. Right? I know my way of development, and doesn't mean it's perfect or even right, but it does work. So, but I'm always open for discussion and. Control KK. I never use bookmarks. I don't navigate the code in that way. I think other tools have kind of replaced the need for bookmarks. Okay. Well, time is flying today on me. So we now have add planning items. We have a table for associated, again, right now, planning items, associated projects. So there is a table there, planning item ID, project identifier. Our model is there. Planning item ID, project identifier, and our configuration is all there. So what we should be able to do now is pass this up. So let's see. Angular side. I've got to get those fonts the same. That's driving me nuts. Like I jump back and forth, and WebStorm is smaller. JetBrains Mono 18 is what I'm using. Why is there a new? I don't think I signed up for the EAP version of WebStorm. There seems to be a new version every day. I do like to use JetBrains products. Just kind of an evolved preference, I suppose. I like the ecosystem works for me. I can use different editors. Using WebStorm too. It's why is There's why. There's a difference. It's the editor UI I'm talking about. Editor. Appearance and behavior. Appearance. Used to go UI. Used to go UI. $110%. 16, right? Yeah. What? So go 18, okay. There we go, that's a bit closer now. Okay, so I'm not quite done yet. First order of business is actually not to run the application. So I need to create something to give me a list of the projects. Did I actually do that already? Because I'm now back on the original design, right? So the way this system's working, again, if you haven't seen this before, I have several components. Mini monolith, not microservices. They're too big, I believe, for microservices. Several components for the write side of things. They have their own storage. They write into that storage. They publish information to Kafka. I have a consumer over here for a view database, which is kind of all the data combined, and then a GraphQL API sat on top of that. So the client is pulling from GraphQL. Let me close drink water down for now. So in my query here, I have get projects. Okay, so I already have the ability to get a list of projects, so that can run. So in my planning item component now, I need to have the project store. Right, so read only projects. I already have it, so it's fine. And that's the read version. That's why, project store. Don't like that very much, but. So I'm learning my way around Signal Store in NGRX. I'm not sure I'm using it correctly. There's some parts that feel really nice and some parts that feel really disjointed. But we will continue to try. Projects, this.projects.value. So add planning item on the store. So this store is this one. With request starts with project query. Planning item store, planning items right, add planning item. Planning item needs projects again. Projects is a nullable array of project. Project has an ID, a name, and a prefix. We don't need the prefix. Are you building this for stakeholders or just to show on Twitch? I am building this for me right this second. I want to build a product. I'm developing most of it on Twitch because this is my spare time in my day. I do develop stuff off stream. I've been developing this for about almost 9 months. Again, probably full time would be, I've probably put 3 months full time into it. So I do develop a lot more on Twitch than I do off stream, unfortunately, right now. but I do intend it to be a product. So right now it's closed source. I use Kafka, Service Bus, or Mass Transit, several other technologies, and I am trying to build something that I would say is the tool I want to build, right? So I'm trying to build a planning tool first. So I've worked with Jira, I've worked with other tools, some TFS stuff earlier on, you know. So I feel that we are lacking in the planning area of software development, right? The tools that are there are really made to get work done, but they're not really made to collect the information to get the work done effectively. So I'm focusing first on that flow of gathering information, getting requirements, pulling these things together into a flow that then will create not necessarily KPIs. KPIs are an aspect, right? We do focus on how much work we get done, how much throughput we have, how much bandwidth we have, etc. We do focus on those things, but what I want to do is get the information gathering, the requirements gathering smoother, and in turn, stay out of the way of the developer, right? Because most of the tools we use aren't for developers, right? They're for management. So KPIs, yes, could be one of the things, but this date here is not an added date. It's a review date. Everything will have a review date. So nothing can get left. A review date, when it hits the review date, people who care about these things will be notified, and notifications are something that I'm going to have to spend a lot of time on because, noise. How do you cut down noise? How do you focus notifications to tell people what they want? Who cares? How much do they care, etc. So review dates are a big component of what the system is going to work around. So everything will have a review date. You will not be able to avoid having a review date when it comes up. Everything will be ordered by it as well. So this isn't working right now, but everything will be ordered so that the things that should be reviewed are up at the top all the time. You don't get to say, oh, sort by date added or whatever. You just get to say, here's what you need to look at. And the aim is to cut down the backlog, right? So the planning system would become the backlog, the place where ideas go to die, and the software part, the storage side of things, over here, would just be work that actually has definition that needs to be done. That's the goal. So that's why I'm focusing the way I am on the planning side of things. The intent is I want to treat it like it's going to be a real product. I will put everything I can into making it a real product. Along the way, share that journey on Twitch, be able to say, hey, what tools do we use to do, like learn new things myself, things like integration testing, what tools are available for me there. So you're basically building a new Jira with boards. Yeah, I'm building my own, what I think Jira should be. But try and cut the fluff out, because again, most of what Jira is built to be management tooling. It's built to be reporting and visibility of how good people are doing. It's not built and it's not optimized for the information gathering and the requirements focus. You can cut the corners really quickly with Jira, and just, I don't know the sort of group you work in, but for me, I've worked with many groups that are basically like one line, oh, we need to do this. Right? That's a story. Okay, that's what I get to work on. Okay, and it's kind of just get it done sort of stuff. I have had the opportunity to work with people who have put more effort into the planning and the story planning, etc. But it becomes messy. So my focus, my difference is a focus on reviews. It's kind of funny, we have people who filter stories. I want to focus on visibility and notification. A developer should never have to care about where something is. Development that crosses multiple teams should be visible to multiple teams, and we should be able to see overall project status across many boards. So I'm just trying to work on the concepts, and I have a lot of notes I've written down as to what I feel will make it better, but I won't know until I get there. And again, the benefit of streaming on Twitch is there's other experiences that can go into this, right? That I can add and discuss. And if it doesn't work out, if it doesn't become a product because I feel that it's just not going to be there, then the entire stack gets open sourced and can be used to tinker with, and people can learn from. And that's okay. But realistically, as a developer, you don't want to even be in Jira. The only time you want to see Jira is when product is saying, hey, can we talk about these story requirements, right? So that's why this is like, okay, well, here's my planning item, here's my requirements. I want to add a new requirement. Okay, what do I want to do? What do I want to see? This will be much bigger. I'll be able to attach screenshots, etc. to it. Notes and stuff become part of this. So this planning item is the thoughts of the planning, the product team building out what they think of this story, and then the developers can come in, and the flow will be, yep, that's part of the story, that's part of the story, nope, that's a different story, that's for a different team, a different project, and then split this out and push them to the right pieces so they're organized that way. And then you don't have a backlog that is built up of some confusing story. This can be evolved before it even makes it into the story side of things. So planning items is something that I think is a difference from what I've seen. Monday.com does have some planning tools around it. I haven't had the opportunity to use Monday.com, unfortunately. So if I reinvent some wheels, I reinvent some wheels. Yeah, so the aim is to try and keep the developers out of this as much as possible. Jira's ticket's just an idea. Most tasks get assigned through emails or team calls. And, teams adapt workflows, right? So your experience of Jira might not be my experience of Jira, because we kind of, the people who, if you open up Jira as someone who's never touched it, and you're a development team that's kind of, we need a tool, so we use Jira, you're going to use a fraction of its abilities. You're never going to get to see it used properly. And again, it's why tickets is a component of the system overall. Ticketing is an entire component to itself. So think of, if you use Jira and Confluence, etc., use the platform. Think of this more as, you select a drop down. I want to do planning. I want to see stories. I want to do ticketing. They're just big modules of the same application stack. Thing is, you have dailies. Most people do Agile or a sort of reporting with a board in front of you. One of my hang-ups at my job is that we can't plan, apparently. Right. And again, planning is not the job of the developer necessarily. It could be. But again, putting the tools there to build out the planning and separate them from the stories. Dailies, yeah. So I'm not saying there won't be boards. I'm not avoiding the boards. I'm saying that you don't need to drive your work off of the boards, right? The boards are a reporting tool. They're a visibility thing, and management care more about, okay, where do things lie? And review dates and notifications, again, is a big part of the system, in that if a piece of work is moved to done and it's scheduled to be released, right? Does the developer track that? The modern version of Agile is fragile. And it's just like everything else, right? We adapt what we need, and what I want to do, and it should be one of the driving principles. TPM tracks that individuals and interactions of a process and tools, right? That's a key tenet, right, of the Agile Manifesto, right? But we spend so much time trying to apply what we do to processes and tools, right? So we end up with this world of we keep trying to make we keep trying to make the tools more complex, and I think we need to get out of the way a little bit. So that's what this platform is going to be. Again, it's closed source. There are components of it that are open source as well. The Kafka components that I use, this application is now using the library. So I do share some things. I developed a mediator outbox as well. So there's a Kafka outbox and a mediator outbox. Mediator outbox is so I could support distributed transaction, or a transaction without creating events, but still benefit from using the events. So yeah, there's a lot of different stuff, and if there's libraries that would be useful to other people along the way, I'm open to people saying, hey, that would be kind of useful to have, and I'll open source components of it. Thank you for the follow, MLG. I appreciate it. So let's see if we can get... So add planning item. We now pass in the projects. That is actually a list of projects because it will be in a second. This source is about to be projects. Sorted projects. Oh, that's a point. Project store. Projects query with methods. Load all. Yeah. I do want an alias on this, don't I? What's it called? It's a grx.io. So I'm using this. This documentation is not signals, signal store, custom store features with computed. Is it with computed I want? Where's the example? I think with computed is what I want. Core concepts. Defining computed signals with computed books filter. Yeah, there we go. That's kind of what I want. Okay. So with computed. So this is projects. Expected 1 arguments, but got 2. Okay, let's just do that. Angular is my UI or my client side, client of choice right now. This is all built on APIs, all built on GraphQL, etc. So there's nothing to say I couldn't refresh the UI with something else. Blazor is not going to be it right this second, that's for certain. I do work on another project on Mondays and Tuesdays, which may change very soon. That's kind of a work in progress sort of project that is more than it's fully open source. You're more than welcome to contribute, more than welcome to question, and it's built for discussion. This is a little bit more intimidating to most people, and as I have been told, way too complicated to engage with by some people. Okay, so why does that not have... So books here, access previously defined state and computed signals. So book state, why is that not... I'm QA, we mostly work with JS. Nice. That's an important role. Good QA is very necessary. This is a little too complicated for me as I'm not a full-time coder. No worries, Wesley. Again, I don't have to be... I like to be productive on stream, and if people are finding this a good co-working stream, that's awesome, and I'm happy to do it. But if you do have questions, if you do want to dig into something I'm doing, don't feel that you can't ask, right? Sometimes explaining something can actually help you understand something more. So maybe there's something I think I understand that I don't. So having to answer questions on it could actually test my understanding as well. Okay, so I want to get this done before the end of the stream. Oh yeah, I'm mostly working on something less complicated myself at the moment. No worries. That's the best way to learn, to be honest, holding workshops. It is. I have a question. What is your most favorite PHP feature? You need new material. My favorite PHP feature is actually a bad feature. Actually, I will have an answer for that one. The best and worst feature of PHP is traits. So traits are pretty cool because they can allow you to extend the behavior of a class. Like, it's composability, I suppose. So it's pretty cool in that you can kind of say, okay, well, this class extends a base class, but also let's use this thing, and it will pull in this set of behaviors as well. So you can kind of create a class, a superclass, with different methods. But it's a horrible thing from a design perspective, because you end up with loss of single responsibility, and then you could use these traits wherever. So it's both a great feature and a bad feature. It's not code reuse, that's for certain. It would allow you to create a class that has different overrides, I suppose, and maybe there's a cleaner way of using it, but yeah. The ultimate spaghetti code, so yeah, exactly. Extension methods, essentially, but they weave in, so it's a little bit cleaner. Extension methods are the closest .NET's got to it, yeah. But you can kind of put a behavior off in its own file, which does mean you can increase readability. But yeah. And I live in spaghetti code. Ugh. Okay, so why do you not like that? Is that just because I'm not using it, or is it because it doesn't know what project is? So it should be... This documentation, by the way, is not good. There's too many missing pieces. Accessing previously defined state and computed signals. Book state. Type book state. There we go. That's why. It's pulling the state. So when I have multiple states, what does that mean? Signals factory. So with state, refresh state. So I bet I could use his current there. Yeah, I have that available to me. So with request states, with entities. So with entities exists. So I have entities. Okay, there we go. That's why. Hey. So this is sorted projects. And yes, I've just diverted onto doing something that I actually didn't need to do because I didn't need to do this right now. I could have just dealt with the projects. We don't have filtering, so that doesn't matter. Return entities to sorted. A dot name compare B, and that's our sort function from before. That's that. That's that. That closes that. And that closes that. That closes that. Which one does that close? So that's that. That's that. There we go. Okay. So now we have a computed method, sorted projects, which we can then use there. So now if we run this app up, we've got the other app up. We run this app up. So MLG, what framework are you working in now? You said JS. You are React, or are you blessed with Angular? That looks confusing. So this feature is newer in Rider. React to do auto test in Nightwatch. Nightwatch. Of course, Mr. Troll comes out. Blessed with Angular, is that what we're going with? We're going with blessed with Angular, yeah. I know it's not the more popular one. I know that. I know that React definitely has more traction. I just like the separation, the HTML, the TS, etc. To me, it fits. Okay, so we go to new item now. We go to projects. There we go. There's our projects. Planning, story, tenant management, and ticketing. Cool. Okay, so that's piece number one. Then we go to add. So we pass forward that to add planning. So in our planning item store, when we do the write, we're adding a planning item. Planning item has projects attached to it. Then we call add planning item on the planning service. It's funny, we've got to the point where we're actually kind of modeling the same thing as on the back end in the front end, and then the database is the API to communicate with the back end, which then starts the entire process over again. We just have layers of abstraction in place. So the way this is using the signal store, etc., essentially I could mock the signal store and then test my UI with a mock signal store without actually making those tests. So that's why it's beneficial to disconnect those HTTP calls rather, not HTML calls, from the backend. And good morning, Deflux, by the way. Nice of you to join. If you managed to get your 5 minutes in the stream. Fetch one, fetch all, add requirement, add planning item. So again, this is going to be projects. Yeah, that works. So let's see if it does work. So we go to add a new planning item. So the planning item would be to introduce filtering for projects. On planning view. And what I'm not doing right now is I'm not overthinking the view side of things, because as much as they will control how people perceive the potential for the project, if I spend too much time worrying about the way it looks, I'm going to not focus on the features, and I really want to focus on the features. When I navigate to the planning view, I want to be able to filter the planning items by projects they are associated with. 05, and we'll say that has to be reviewed by the 14th. It's assigned to Jeffrey Winkle, and the projects it affects are planning. Yep, that's fine. Create that. Should appear here. Now, so it didn't error. So for this to appear, this has to have returned an ID. So this record only shows on the screen when an ID has been fetched back from the server. So we know that that item relates to a server-side object. It didn't work. It did do this. Did I have this open when I did that? Yes, I did. Oh. To be honest, it's way more simple to play around with the back. Automating and playing around with the front is more time consuming. I think everything in the front end is more time consuming, whether it be layout with the CSS, whether it be composing pieces. I think it is a little bit more complicated and a little bit more fragile. The back end, if it saves the data, it saves the data, right? I don't know what the problem was there, by the way. That's why. What I shouldn't do is I shouldn't make my first test of something look like I actually want it to be a thing, because then the second test looks weird. Testing another thing. Oh, 520. There's no validation on that yet, so oh, that happened fast. So we sent project identifiers. Still didn't associate. We did get there. So now it's time to debug quickly. Project identifiers. Maybe then make a test, and test of the tests. That's not a good sign. Testing is something that we often overlook. It's easy to overlook because it's hard to do effectively. But if you can validate your system with tests and you trust them, delivery of features is less scary for everyone involved, right? So if I have QA, I want them to have 100% confidence that the tests they have will absolutely validate the system. So QA should be involved from the beginning of the discussion, right? Anybody who is responsible for delivering stuff to the client, whether it be developer, DevOps, QA, even team members around usability, like documentation and stuff like that, they should all be involved from the beginning, so they're all on the same page. Yeah, I've had my best experience when I've had a QA person sat right next to me while I've been developing, because I can ask questions. If I say something out loud and they overhear me say it, they're like, whoa, 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 why did we say that? It's the extra validation. They understand what they're testing, and also they can be more involved with that process. And teams that don't do that, there's a big risk you're just going to miss things. So that did come back up. So this notification is the I use GraphQL notifications. So when the planning item gets updated, it gets sent to Kafka. Kafka, it publishes to Kafka. The message then is picked up by the view. The view then publishes a service bus message, which then triggers the alert there. Most big companies do that now. I wish I was in one of them. Our QA are involved, but we don't do much planning, and it's a challenge sometimes, right? But I've had my best experience when I've actually sat with QA and worked as I develop. Worked with them as I develop, communicate and talk about thoughts and problems, and allow them to see what I'm doing as I'm testing during development. But again, the best software is going to be delivered when everyone involved is confident in that it meets the needs that it's been asked to meet. But that's why the requirements phase is important, because you have to gather good requirements. You have to get this stuff together and understand what you're trying to deliver as clearly as you can, so that assumptions are the worst thing to have. If you don't, you can do the best work. Doesn't meet the stakeholders' needs. Okay, there we go. So we did get up here. So did we have, in our request, did we have, no, project identifiers is null. Planning items, preview. I'm terrible at this. Headers, payload, project identifiers. Why is that null? Using external APIs your own. Hi Deformer, how you doing? All this is all my code. There's no external dependencies at all yet. Oh, I'm not bad. It is Friday. I'm hoping to get this working before I have to start my workday. Passing. So project identifiers. Did I spell that correctly? Project identifiers. Identifiers. You in the US that you have to start your workday? In the EU, it's about to end, kinda. Yeah, my accent does make it confusing. Yeah, I'm on the East Coast, US, so it's 9:10 in the morning for me. I am from the UK originally. Yes. Oh. When people ask me where I'm from, I reply civilization. 4 p.m. Wow. So you're 7 hours out, yeah. Why are you not binding? What am I doing wrong? So everything else is binding fine, but that's not. Yeah, it catches most people out because this is 16 years of being in the US. Yeah. You haven't lost your accent much, right, Deflux? Certain words infect it, though. Like, you know, when we start using more American words, you can tell. And if you go back to the UK, people definitely know you've been away. Project identifiers. I'm struggling to understand what I'm missing, unless it's yeah, they know. Yeah. when I went back the first time, the first thing that people picked up on was the fact that they said I spoke more slowly than I used to. And after a couple of weeks being back there, the speed increases again. Yeah. No, this is insulting. This is probably better. I mean, I don't know why I chose an array in the first place, right? It probably is more appropriate to use IEnumerable here anyway. An array is IEnumerable in theory. He's got slow like the Americans. After 2 weeks of being there, I start speaking a lot faster again. It's funny how that I never even picked up on how fast I actually do talk, and if I get tired, it all comes back, and my people don't understand. So okay, one more try. Simple test. Best this works. It's funny, I know that there's no validation. I know that it's not going to work. I can't leave it be in the past. Okay, so it added. It hit the breakpoint that I removed. Oh, let's just see if it worked. It still didn't work. So it's not failing because it's perfectly valid for it to not have the project identifiers. Project identifiers. Yep, I'm spelling it correctly. It's passing them. Switch to. Why will you not update to this version? Is the US better than the EU? No. I think, like every country in the world, it has problems. And the grass isn't always greener, right? Did I put that breakpoint on there then? Okay, well, one last go. Next. Kind of ugly, to be honest. Ouch. Ouch. Just because I moved to the US does not mean that I don't like the UK. I love the UK. I'm from a rural area. Um, okay. Um, the bad weather. The funny thing is, it rains in the summer. It rains as much in New Jersey as it does in the UK. Right. The difference is it rains maybe once every 2 weeks here, but it rains a lot all at once. So you get a lot of rain in one big chunk rather than distributed slowly across a couple of weeks. And also, if you're in the south of the UK versus the north, the weather's different. I'm in Europe too. Romania, the UK was just strange. I was in the north. Okay, well, I'm from the north, so yeah. And it depends on where you are. Like if you're in somewhere like a city like Sheffield, or you're in towns, then it can look a bit more bleak. Um, so did that just fail? Oh no, just it hit here. Okay. Oh, we have a project identifier. So it kind of worked. Oh, all the houses look the same. It was creepy. Yeah, I can see that. I can see how rows and rows of houses looks very weird. Um, but you know, okay. I am quickly running out of time here. I have no option but to end. Um, if you're ever interested in continuing our conversations off stream, there is a Discord. It is linked in the panels below. I think there's a Discord command now. Um, I'm always happy to look at other projects. I'm always happy to discuss, if you have thoughts and opinions on stuff. There is some good conversation options in the Discord. There's several people that do like to engage in larger conversations. So you're more than welcome to join. Okay, 8. That said 7, so I was like, I'm just going to hold. Okay, so let's give it one more go. We should... are you going to work? Oh, come on. Win Simi, welcome. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. Tell me I haven't been doing this all along. So I don't reset this form. Tell me I've not been... Tell me. There we go. Finally. Can I ask one question? Yeah, absolutely. So okay, let me highlight several of the problems that there was a lot of PEPCAP going on there, right? I think a lot of that was caused by the fact that when I went into the screen, I haven't been resetting the form. So this said, planning. So I was like, oh, it's planning, right? if I hit the X, right, it's going to clear it out. I wasn't clearing it out, so I was actually sending nothing, but it looked like it was something because it wasn't stored in the projects list, right? Just because it was showing doesn't mean it was actually there. How to add followers and subs tab here. Is this extension which name? I'm not sure I follow. Add followers and subs tab here. Here being Twitch? I'm not entirely sure what you mean. Oh, how do you add? Oh, have I got a panel on? I've got a goal. Are you starting to stream? Is that what you mean? How do you add those? Those are in your dashboard. They are manage goals, and you can set targets for what you want. There's just a way of trying to help promote, people subscribing and following, etc. So you can set follower goals. I think I've got my follower goal set to 1,000 right this second. I don't get to see the actual panels, so yeah, I think I've got the subs goal, 18. So if you go into your dashboard and select manage goals, you'll be able to select, okay, what's my sub goal amount, right? And it'll give you the widget. So I can actually put it on the screen as well if I want to, but it puts it below the stream. And you can do the same for followers. So yeah. So basically what I wasn't doing here, I wasn't actually actively setting this again. So that was never passing that up. But then there was another problem that exposed itself when I did have it there. So I had this after this, right? Now again, the unit test worked fine because I'd added it and then I changed the same object. So this object was a reference. So that, again, this is another reason why testing and actually integration testing something is useful. So my test passed fine, right? I'd have never caught that with a unit test because just because I called add, I got back that same object. So this result here, when this was in the other direction, the result that I captured when I hit add was a reference. So when I went and did this afterwards, it worked fine because I had a reference to that object, right? Had it been a value, it would have broken, right? But I had to make it a class, so that can't be done. So this test would have passed every single time. And just to validate, it'll still pass now with it in the right order. We know it does because it works, right? But now this is added, which means this is added later, which means that this association here now gets this ID. What was happening is this would add it. The ID wasn't attached. And now it doesn't actually know about the things. It doesn't know about the ID to add. So it never does the associate projects properly because we've already added it. And this add saves as well. So this was just being done externally and never saved. So the order matters there. And there we go. So that's some progress, right? We now can associate projects with a planning item that's working. Again, doing some integration testing. I do want to start looking next week, probably on water. Water will start with it, but I do want to start looking at things like what's the .NET unit client-side testing framework that I can't remember now. I've got a note somewhere for it. Do want to start looking at testing frameworks. This is all SQL Server right now. I did have Couchbase. Tickets was backed by Couchbase originally. Then I moved it to SQL Server. I'll probably move I probably will use Couchbase later on for some stuff. So right now everything's a SQL Server database. Each one has its own storage. And then, but I'm not opposed to using different technologies. When we get to search, we'll get into Elasticsearch or options. And yeah, SQL queries are simple, but because of the way this is designed, I'm not doing that much difficult SQL. So, yeah, and document DBs are just as powerful. And they have their own advantages, right? Especially when it comes to things like notes and stuff. Maybe the storage doesn't need to be SQL for that. They might be better stored as objects, as documents. So, yeah. But anyway, I have to go. Oh, I know where I'm going today because she has just started. So I will be going over here anyway. It is a bit of a departure from what I'm doing with AppDev. I'm going to go over to Sorcery Story now. So we're going to raid over to Sorcery Story. She is developing an amazing little game that she can best describe. But there's RPG elements in there, base building elements. There's all sorts of cool stuff. She's doing C# with Godot. So let's go raid Sorcery. I will be back on Monday. If I stream over the weekend, I don't really announce it. I might do some game streaming over the weekend. Now I've got my equipment set up for that, but that will be random anyway. But I will be back on Monday where we'll pick up some drink water this week, and we'll talk about what comes next in that project. And yeah, so thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for the chat. This has been a lot of fun. Again, if you want to continue any conversations or ask further questions, I'm always open to doing that on Discord, and you can find that below. So thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Thank you. And see you all later. Take care all. Thank you.